This is Rummy's Corner.
Oh, come on, man. What about Joe Louis?
The Brown Bomber. Now that was a great boxer.
He was bad in Captain Clay. He bad in Sugar Ray. He bad in that. Who that? The new boy got Mike Tyson. Look like a bulldog. He bad at him too. He done whipped Mike Tyson there. He whipped all their asses.
Good evening, boxing fans, and welcome back. Today we will be looking into two hypothetical heavyweight tournaments. The first of these tournaments will be based on the results from my heavyweight ranking experiment last year, and the second tournament will be based on a list of all-time heavyweight rankings compiled by Ring Magazine a few years back. This is the first tournament bracket based on the results of last year's ranking experiment. For our purposes here, I'm going to assume that these hypothetical matchups will be taking place when each of these heavyweight greats was at or very near his fighting prime. Each hypothetical matchup will take place under modern day rules with 12-round durations, and please note that this is all meant in good fun. I suck enough as it is when it comes to predicting actual matchups that really happen, so there is no reason whatsoever to believe that my predictions regarding hypothetical matchups should fare any better. In the first matchup, we have number 1 seed Muhammad Ali going up against number 16 seed Zora Folley. And this fight actually happened on March 22nd, 1967. Ali was victorious and he stopped Folley in round 7. Ali was near his absolute peak at this time, and Folley was past his best, but even if Folley was a little younger, I don't think things would have played out much differently. So for this opening matchup, I'm very comfortable picking Ali here. I'm going with the same result, Ali by KO 7. So Muhammad Ali moves on to the next round. In the next matchup, we have number 8 seed Larry Holmes going up against number 9 seed Big George Foreman. This was a dream match that never ultimately came together. It didn't happen in the 1970s, it didn't happen in the 1990s, and even now, all these years later, it's very difficult to decide who would have won if they were both at their best. Foreman had the firepower to stop any heavyweight who ever laced him up. Big George at his best was an absolute powerhouse. But the Eastern Assassin had the skills, the smarts, and the mental toughness required to outgrit Foreman in a battle of attrition. And I tend to believe that's how things most likely would have played out. This is a very tough draw for both of these guys in the opening round, as head-to-head, I would favor Foreman and Holmes against most other heavyweights. I believe Larry survives the early onslaught with a few scary moments along the way, and possibly even suffering a knockdown. But I think Larry would persevere and out-hustle Foreman late in the contest. I'm going with Larry Holmes by a very close decision in a competitive contest. So Holmes moves on to the next round. The third matchup brings us another fight that already happened, when number 5 seed Lennox Lewis goes up against number 12 seed Vitaly Klitschko. This heavyweight clash still produces heated debate to this very day. This was the best version of Vitaly we ever saw going up against a version of Lewis who was well past his best with one foot out the door. And still, Lennox won the fight against the best version of Vitaly, even when Lennox was past his best. I confidently believe that the best version of Lennox Lewis from several years earlier would have performed much better against Vitaly. So I'm taking Lennox Lewis in this one. Let's call it TKO 5. Lennox advances to the next round on my bracket. In the fourth matchup, we have number 4 seed Evander Holyfield going up against number 13 seed Alexander Povetkin. In fairness to Povetkin, he was a highly rated heavyweight for many years, but I never saw anything from him that leads me to believe he could have ever competed with the real deal. Even if you dismiss Povetkin's lackluster effort against Marco Huck as an off night, Povetkin never really put forth an awe-inspiring performance. On the other hand, Holyfield made a career out of putting forth awe-inspiring efforts, and he had much greater success at the highest level against higher caliber competition. I'm taking Evander Holyfield in this one, most likely by a wide points victory, and possibly even a later round stoppage. Either way, Holyfield advances for me. The fifth matchup is yet another one that actually already happened between number 2 seed Joe Louis and number 15 seed Jack Sharkey. Sharkey was at the end of the road by this point, and this was a pre-championship version of Joe Louis. The Brown Bomber dropped Sharkey twice in the second and twice more in the third, the final knockdown which saw him get counted out. I'm confident picking Joe Louis in this one, as I don't think any version of Sharkey would ever beat the Brown Bomber. So I'm taking Louis. We'll call it a third round knockout. In the next matchup, we have number 7 seed Iron Mike Tyson squaring off against number 10 seed Smokin' Joe Frazier. To quote the late great Hall of Fame trainer Emanuel Stewart, "Oh my God, talk about a dream match." This, in my opinion, is the most difficult fight to pick in the opening round. Frazier was typically a slow starter who tended to get better and stronger as the fight progressed. On the other hand, Tyson was a fast starter who frequently charged out of the gate like an explosive firestorm. Fast hands are something that frequently caused Frazier some problems, especially earlier on in the contest. Frazier had an incredible chin, but a powerhouse like Big George was able to knock him down repeatedly. Tyson has a combination of speed and power, and no matter who you think would win this one, Tyson is most likely going to jump out to an early lead here. So the big question is, can Tyson take Frazier out early? And if he can't take Frazier out in the first half of the fight, can Tyson survive a surging Frazier later in the fight? If Tyson got to Frazier early and was able to drop him like Foreman was, under modern 12-round rules, an early stoppage for Tyson is a strong possibility here. My best guess? I do think Tyson jumps out to an early lead, and that his faster hands and two-handed power act as a menace to Frazier over the first 6 rounds, where Tyson might even score a knockdown along the way. I think Frazier perseveres, and true to form, Smokin' Joe would start fighting more competitively in the middle rounds before completely seizing command of the momentum in the later rounds, possibly scoring a knockdown of his own later in the fight. It would be an absolutely grueling affair, but in a 12-round contest, I think Tyson holds on for a razor-thin 12-round decision. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this one, and if it were a 15-round fight, well, the longer it goes, the more it favors Frazier. But since it's a modern-day 12-round rules, I think Tyson close on points with a slim chance of an early stoppage. But then again, Frazier might break Tyson down mentally to score a late-round stoppage, or he might pull ahead on points late in the fight. Very difficult to call, but I have Iron Mike progressing to the next round. In the 7th matchup, we get number 3 seed Vladimir Klitschko going up against number 14 seed Sonny Liston. This is a fairly tricky one to call. Prime Klitschko with Stewart, he might be able to outfox Liston and smother him inside to get a workmanlike decision or a late round stoppage. I do believe Prime Vlad is a force to be reckoned with, and I like his chances against many all-time great heavyweights. But against Sonny Liston, you have a physically strong guy who's powerful and who jabs well enough that Vladimir might have difficulty controlling the range and winning the battle of the jabs. The physicality of Liston also makes it difficult for Klitschko to rely on his inside smothering tactics. And on the whole, Klitschko's style is pretty conventional, where I believe Liston isn't going to be baffled in the same way he was against a young Ali. I think Liston gets to Vlad early and takes him out. Bad style matchup for Vlad. I'm taking Sonny Liston by second round knockout, so Liston advances for me. In the final first round matchup, we have number 6 seed Floyd Patterson going against number 11 seed Max Schmeling. This is a tricky one too, as I believe Max and Floyd both tend to be underrated in the grand scheme of things. Patterson and Schmeling are both skilled enough and powerful enough that they could beat the other guy, but I think they're also both flawed enough that they could lose to the other guy. It's a very difficult one to pick, but for me, the fact that Schmeling was able to defeat the great Joe Louis, not only is that victory a better win than anything on Patterson's resume, It's arguably the greatest win in heavyweight history. I'm taking Schmeling by mid-round stoppage in a blazing affair, but a mid-round stoppage for Patterson wouldn't surprise me either. So I have Max advancing to the next round. So looking back at the first round, the two most difficult fights to predict as I see them were Holmes versus Foreman and Tyson versus Frazier. I'm at least fairly confident with most of the others. That doesn't mean I'm correct. I'm not claiming to be the final authority here. Again, this is just my opinion, and it's all in good fun. Moving on to round 2. First, we have another fight that already happened between number 1 seed Muhammad Ali and number 8 seed Larry Holmes. Of course, when this fight happened, Holmes was probably at or getting very close to his peak ability, and Ali was well past his best. A lot of people believe that a prime version of Ali would have defeated Holmes, and some think he would have done so in dominant fashion. I do not believe that is the case. With Holmes and Ali both at their best, I think you're inevitably looking at a razor-thin, somewhat controversial decision that could wind up going either way or perhaps even being ruled a draw. These guys both have the type of styles that were going to be a nightmare against each other. They do so many of the same things so well. Incredibly athletic, gifted boxers, both with tremendous ring IQs, both with incredible heart and determination. This is a very winnable fight for Holmes. And while my mind says Ali would probably win, my heart actually believes Larry would triumph. I'm reluctantly going to pick Ali by a razor-thin decision, mainly because I think Ali's flashier in-ring charisma, I think that would win the day in the eyes of the judges. But a really close victory for Holmes is a definite possibility here. So Ali advances to the semifinals. Next, we have another matchup that really happened, and this one actually happened twice, between number 4 seed Evander Holyfield and number 5 seed Lennox Lewis. Their first bout was a controversial draw that most observers believed Lewis deserved to win. Their rematch was a unanimous decision for Lewis, in a bout that some people thought Holyfield edged it, or at least earned a draw. I myself thought Lennox won both bouts, but at this point in time, Lennox was much closer to his prime, whereas Holyfield was much further removed from his. I think a younger Holyfield certainly makes it a more exciting fight. However, at his best, under the guidance of Emanuel Stewart, I think Lewis still edges it. And perhaps Lewis even has a better chance to score a knockout because I believe younger Holyfield would take more risks. A Holyfield stoppage isn't impossible here, nor is a Holyfield win on points, but I still have to favor Lennox in this one. So Lennox moves on to the semifinals to face Muhammad Ali. Then we have a classic clash of styles between number 2 seed Joe Louis and number 7 seed Mike Tyson. In an all-time sense, Joe Louis absolutely rates higher than Tyson. But head-to-head, I genuinely believe the styles favor Iron Mike here. Louis was sometimes troubled by speedy fighters like Billy Conn, and he could also be dropped early on in contests. While it's true that Tyson never fought anyone like Joe Louis, I think the more pressing factor here is that Lewis would have difficulty coping with the raw, explosive firepower of Iron Mike. In a 12-round fight, I think Tyson drops Lewis once or twice in the early going. And while I think Lewis would make adjustments and get better as the fight went on, I think the methodical approach from the Brown Bomber, I think this would afford Tyson the ability to win more close rounds later on. You can never count Joe Louis out, so Lewis knocking Tyson out is a very plausible outcome here. It could definitely happen. I do think Lewis would come on strong later in the fight, but I think Tyson wins a decision in this one. So I have Mike Tyson advancing to the semifinals. The last fight in the second round is number 11 seed Max Schmeling squaring off against number 14 seed Sonny Liston. Simply put, I like Liston in this one. Schmeling had a good jab and a beautiful right hand, but I believe Liston had a better jab and a better right hand. And more importantly, I believe Liston was more durable and packed a harder punch. I don't think Liston would have much trouble getting to Schmeling, so I'm picking Liston in this one by an early knockout. Moving on to the semifinals, in the first matchup we have number 1 seed Muhammad Ali squaring off against number 5 seed Lennox Lewis. This is a very winnable fight for Lennox. Lewis has the size, the skills, and the power to give Ali all types of fits. More importantly, Lennox had the mental fortitude that I don't think he would be intimidated by the situation. A well-prepared, focused version of Lewis is going to cause problems for Ali. But the reverse is true too. And the big difference here that ultimately makes me favor Ali is that I believe Ali would be able to capitalize whenever Lewis was taking a breather where he had his foot off the gas. Ali had incredible instincts when it came to turning up the heat whenever his opponent was trying to coast. Furthermore, it's worth considering Lewis's 2 knockout losses against McCall and Rockman. Granted, neither of these were the best versions of Lewis, and despite the fact Ali arguably didn't crack as hard as those guys, it wasn't really the power behind those punches that floored Lewis, so much as it was the great timing. These were right hands that Lennox never saw coming. Contrary to popular myth, Lewis had a formidable chin. Lennox could take a punch, but with a guy like Ali, whose bread and butter was delivering well-timed sneaky right hands, I think Ali has a better chance of scoring a knockout here than Lennox, even though Lewis is clearly the bigger puncher. Think Rumble in the Jungle. Whether it's a close win on points or a well-timed stoppage any point along the way, I like Muhammad Ali in this one, so I have Ali advancing to the final. In the other semifinals matchup, we have number 7 seed Iron Mike Tyson going up against number 14 seed Sonny Liston. Tough one to call. Liston has a really good chance of taking Tyson out early, and Tyson has a good chance of blasting Liston out early. But I don't think it would be fast. I think it would be a brutal short war of attrition. Think something in the mold of Foreman versus Lyle. I think both guys would have moments, and both would find ways to land power shots. Tyson and Liston are often both criticized for being mentally fragile, but I think it's worth noting that the evidence of such largely surfaced when both of these legends were past their best fighting days. I think this one is kind of a coin flip pick, but I'm going with Iron Mike. I believe Tyson's superior athleticism and quickness would enable him to consistently get the best of the exchanges for as long as it lasted. And I think Tyson breaks Liston in a tremendous tactical slugfest. And with that, I have Mike Tyson advancing to the final to square off against number 1 seed Muhammad Ali. This is a matchup that I've long seen fans discuss. It's an intriguing clash of styles, and one where I believe each boxer is capable of causing the other all types of problems. Ali and Tyson are both incredibly fast, and their fighting styles couldn't be more different. I believe Tyson probably gets off to a slightly better start, but maybe not. Best case scenario for Tyson here, he closes the distance early and finds ways to land quick power shots in bunches when possible. But Ali was a master at disrupting his opponent's rhythm, and I think that even if Tyson got off to a fast start, that Ali would quickly start making adjustments that help neutralize Tyson's ample offensive arsenal. In addition to believing that Ali would be able to neutralize Tyson's rhythm, I also think that Ali would be able to establish his own rhythm before the halfway point. Make no mistake, Tyson would have a real chance here, as he has all types of tools that have traditionally troubled Ali. But I think it's Ali's set of tools that would ultimately control the action in this one. So I like Muhammad Ali by 12-round decision. And with that, Muhammad Ali wins my first of 2 hypothetical heavyweight tournaments. Let's do another one. This one based on a list of all-time heavyweight rankings compiled by Ring Magazine a few years back. So our new tournament bracket looks like this. Same as before, we're assuming all of these guys are at or near their best under modern 12-round rules. And once again, this is just my opinion, all in good fun. In the first matchup, we have number 1 seed Muhammad Ali squaring off against number 16 seed Vladimir Klitschko. This is another really tough draw for Vladimir. With Ali's speedy hands and quicker feet, I think Vlad has a hard time consistently getting leverage on his punches. Vlad will have some spots of success, and in a lot of ways, I think this is a better matchup for Vlad than Liston would have been. But I still don't believe that this is a fight Vladimir wins. Vlad was older when he lost to Fury, but a lot of the things that Fury troubled Klitschko with are areas where Ali always excelled. Klitschko could possibly score a KO, maybe, but I don't think he scraps his way to a victory in this one. I like Ali by either a comfortable points decision or perhaps even a late round stoppage. Ali advances to round 2. The next matchup is one we already covered, number 8 seed Frazier against number 9 seed Tyson. I stand by everything I already said on this one, and this for me was the most difficult pick to make. I gave Tyson a lot of benefits of the doubt in the last tournament, and I know a lot of Tyson detractors are going to say things like he never beat an elite heavyweight in his prime, and he got beat every time he stepped up. And while those criticisms of Mike certainly have some element of truth in them, the fact remains that I believe Tyson ranks very high in a head-to-head sense. That all being said, I'm going to give Smokin' Joe the benefit of the doubt this time. So I'm going with Frazier by late round stoppage in this one, something I always thought there was a strong possibility to happen. Frazier advances to the next round. In the third matchup, we have another one that already happened, when number 5 seed Larry Holmes meets number 12 seed Evander Holyfield. In their 1992 championship bout, Holyfield defeated Holmes by unanimous decision to retain the undisputed heavyweight crown. Holyfield was at or very near his prime, whereas Larry was pretty far removed from his prime years. I definitely believe that the best version of the Easton Assassin outboxes Holyfield. To be sure, Holyfield would have moments, and he certainly wouldn't be a pushover, but I believe Holmes would win a clear decision over Holyfield if they were both near their peaks. So I have Larry moving on to the next round. Next up, we have number 4 seed Rocky Marciano going up against number 13 seed Gene Tunney. With Tunney, it's a little difficult to gauge how he would fare against other heavyweights from different eras. He only had 3 heavyweight title fights, 2 of those being against an older version of Dempsey. But Tunney only lost once in his career. In a fight series, he actually won against the great Harry Greb. And Tunney was a highly skilled technician. Tunney had all of the right tools to make things tricky for Marciano, and the fact that Rocky wasn't especially big himself means that Tunney has a real shot here. However, I'm inclined to believe Rocky's relentless pursuit catches up to him sooner or later, and I definitely believe a peak Marciano was far better than the version of Dempsey who Tunney twice bested. I like Rocky Marciano by late round stoppage, and I have him advancing to round 2. In the 5th matchup, we have number 2 seed Joe Louis going up against number 15 seed James Jeffries. I have a difficult time envisioning Jeffries having much success against the Brown Bomber. Jeffries only lost when he was past his best against Jack Johnson, but even at his best, from what I've seen of Jeffries, I think the tactical prowess and the concussive power of Joe Louis ultimately proves too much for him. I like Joe Louis by mid to late round stoppage in this one, although Jeffries was pretty tough, so he might see it to the final bell. Either way, Joe Louis advances to the next round on my bracket. Next up, we have number 7 seed George Foreman against number 10 seed Sonny Liston. Tricky one here. Liston threw punches that were straighter and more compact, and this is an advantage that might serve him well against Big George. On the other hand, despite that fact, I don't imagine that Foreman will have too much difficulty finding the mark against Liston. In fact, I believe the uppercut specifically is a punch that Foreman would nail Liston with repeatedly. This one could go either way. You can make strong cases for both guys, but I personally think Big George's uppercut wins the day against Sonny's crisper and more compact punching technique. I'm going with Foreman by mid to late round stoppage, and I wouldn't be surprised if this one ended up looking something like the epic heavyweight war between Big George and Ron Lyle. Foreman moves on to the next round. In the 7th matchup, Number 3 seed Jack Johnson squares off against number 14 seed John L. Sullivan. It's almost impossible to assess exactly what Sullivan brought to the table due to a lack of footage. But even so, based on everything I've ever read about Sullivan and based on everything I've seen of Jack Johnson, I'm perfectly comfortable picking Johnson in this one. I believe Johnson would be able to neutralize Sullivan and break him down to win a decision over 12 rounds. So Jack Johnson advances to round 2. And then the final matchup for the opening round, we have number 6 seed Jack Dempsey pitted against number 11 seed Lennox Lewis. In theory, Dempsey has the speed, the power, and the explosiveness that he could wind up being an absolute nightmare for Lennox. On the flip side, Lennox has a huge size advantage to go along with his telephone pole jab and a menacing right hand. Dempsey would also likely be vulnerable to the tremendous uppercuts from Lennox. While I give Dempsey an outside chance of clobbering Lennox with something horrific, I tend to believe Lennox finds his range very early on, before he is comfortable unloading right-hand bombs behind that long-range jab. I like Lennox Lewis by early knockout, 4 rounds or less, so Lennox advances to the next round. In the last tournament, the trickiest matchup for me was Tyson Frazier, and I think that still holds true here in this one. The runner-up for me here in this one is the Foreman-Liston fight. That's one I could definitely see going Sonny's way. Moving on to round 2. We have number 1 seed Muhammad Ali against career rival and number 8 seed Smokin' Joe Frazier. Of course, this one we got to see 3 times over the course of the most famous trilogy in boxing history. They were both past their best days for their second and third acts, but they were both still formidable. The one fight where they were both closest to being in prime form was when they first met in the fight of the century. In that contest, Smokin' Joe was firing on all cylinders in what was arguably the greatest ever heavyweight victory. Ali wasn't quite the same post-exile, but he was pretty close. Ali was a little slower on his feet, his reflexes weren't quite as sharp, and he probably had a little something less in the fuel tank. All of those subtle signs of decline, those are areas that would have helped Ali tremendously in his first fight with Frazier. If he was just a touch faster and just a bit more elusive. Simply put, pre-exile Ali may have had exactly what he needed to defeat that version of Frazier. So it's very tempting to pick Ali here. But considering these guys were both so close to their best on this night, both undefeated, each man having a legitimate claim to call himself heavyweight world champion, I just can't pick against Joe here. I concede that pre-exile Ali would have had a better chance, but even if Ali was just a little faster and just a little sharper, Joe's determination was simply extraordinary on that night. So I tend to believe he would have been every bit as relentless as he was. I'm taking Smokin' Joe by 12-round decision, and Frazier advances to the semifinals. Next, we have number 4 seed Rocky Marciano going up against number 5 seed Larry Holmes. I'm not one of those guys who automatically dismisses Marciano from hypothetical matchups based on size and size alone. I also happen to believe that Marciano's skill set is vastly underrated, and I also think his resume doesn't quite get the credit that it deserves. To be sure, the likes of Joe Louis, Ezzard Charles, and Jersey Joe Walcott, those guys were all past their best when Rocky beat them, but they were still legit top heavyweights when Rocky beat them. Marciano was a lot sneakier than he gets credit for, and he was unrelenting. I think he could beat a number of modern-day heavyweights who dwarfed him in size, but Larry Holmes certainly isn't one of them. To be sure, I believe Marciano would have his fair share of moments, but by and large, I think the Easton Assassin is far too skilled for the Brockton blockbuster. I'm taking Holmes in a wide points victory, and Larry moves on to the semifinals. In the third matchup of this round, we have number 2 seed Joe Louis going up against number 7 seed George Foreman. Even though Joe Louis was the number 2 seed in both of these tournaments, I think he got extremely difficult second round matchups in Tyson and here again with Foreman. Joe Louis is absolutely one of the greatest heavyweights ever, but I think a guy like George Foreman is all wrong for the Brown Bomber. You can never count Joe Louis out, but I believe Foreman overwhelms him with power, perhaps even sooner than later. I'm taking Big George by mid-round stoppage, and Foreman advances to the semifinals. In the final matchup this round, number 3 seed Jack Johnson squares off against number 11 seed Lennox Lewis. I feel comfortable picking Lennox in this one. I actually see this one playing out as a vintage Lennox-like performance. I think he controls the range with a long jab while effectively neutralizing Johnson's offense and sometimes sneaking in a powerhouse right. I'm inclined to believe that Johnson would go the distance, although a late round stoppage for Lewis is possible. I'm going with Lennox by a comfortable 12-round decision, where Johnson keeps Lewis honest and prevents him from ever consistently landing big and landing flush. So I have Lennox advancing. Moving on to the semifinals, in the first matchup, we have number 5 seed Larry Holmes squaring off against number 8 seed Joe Frazier. This is a dream match, and another one where it's very difficult to choose. The relentless pressure applied by Smokin' Joe is going to cause Holmes just as many problems as it caused Ali. Holmes was usually good at maintaining a safe distance when he was on his toes dancing and using a lot of ring space, but Holmes usually couldn't fight that way for an entire fight. Granted, a lot of Larry's fights were 15-rounders, and this hypothetical matchup is only 12. That helps Holmes. Furthermore, I think Holmes is actually more versatile than Ali, particularly on offense. Ali was so good in the areas where he excelled that he didn't typically need to be as versatile. But against a guy like Frazier, it certainly wouldn't hurt having greater punching versatility. I actually believe Holmes' greater offensive variety serves him well against Frazier. This is a 50-50 fight that might well wind up a draw, but I think Holmes edges it in a crazy competitive crowd-pleasing affair. And then the other semifinals matchup, we have number 7 seed George Foreman going against number 11 seed Lennox Lewis. This is yet another dream match where, of course, it is very difficult to pick a winner. Lennox had all the right tools that he could be competitive with Foreman, and both of these guys threw some really wicked uppercuts. But the problem for Lennox here is that he's not going to be able to coast against Foreman. Lewis is going to need to fight in this one, and he's definitely going to be put to the test. I think Foreman is just too good to allow this one to turn into a boxing match, and I have a very difficult time imagining Lewis outfighting Foreman. On the contrary, I think Foreman's offensive firepower would inevitably overwhelm Lewis, and probably early on. Lewis might be able to fend George off with his long jab for a couple of rounds, but he's going to have to exert an awful lot of energy doing so. And I don't think George slows down before ultimately catching up with Lewis. This is a bad style matchup for Lennox. I have Big George Foreman scoring an early to fairly early knockout. With that, Foreman advances to the final to meet number 5 seed Larry Holmes. This is a matchup we covered previously that I was torn over. I still believe the strongest likely outcome here is a points victory for Larry. I know with Frazier and Tyson, I picked Tyson in the first tournament, which is my real pick, but I gave Frazier the benefit of the doubt this time around. I'm going to do the same thing here, in the name of being consistently inconsistent, which is kind of part of the point here. Because Big George definitely had what it took to beat Larry. Foreman's incredible power was enough to devastate any boxer the sport has ever known. So George Foreman wins the second hypothetical tournament. I want to add a final note about the Easton Assassin. Try and imagine a situation where we could take the best 25 heavyweights of all time and bring them all together where they're each at the peak of their powers. Also imagine that it's a magical place where none of these heavyweights ever age and their skills never deteriorate. If we had a giant round robin where each of these 25 boxers faced the other 24, I honestly believe that Larry Holmes is the most likely to emerge with the best overall record of the bunch. I don't believe Holmes was the greatest heavyweight ever. I personally have him at number 3 behind Muhammad Ali and Joe Louis. But in a head-to-head sense, I really think Larry probably finishes with the best overall record. When I look at these two tournaments, I have Holmes losing to Prime Ali, and then here I gave Foreman the nod. But the truth of the matter is, I'm not so sure that Holmes wouldn't be the overall winner in both of these tournaments. He's a nightmare proposition head-to-head, just like Iron Mike. And while I didn't cover a fight between Prime Holmes and Prime Tyson here, I had so much damn fun making this episode that I'm certainly planning to do a follow-up edition where I try and explore more matchups I haven't covered, and maybe even introduce some new names we didn't see here. Guys like Riddick Big Daddy Bo, and Jersey Joe Walcott, and Ingemar Johansson, along with a few others maybe. And I'll also eventually try and do similar hypothetical tournaments for middleweight, light heavyweight, and welterweight, and maybe a few other weight classes down the road. And that's all I got. So who would you have picked as the winners in these two hypothetical heavyweight tournaments? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. I hope you enjoyed, everyone. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful night. This is Rummy's Corner.